Hello, hi everybody. Welcome to 2025. I'm your host Leon Gordon and I'm here with my co-host Pragati Jain.
Hey everyone, wish you all a happy new year and I hope everyone is getting started quite strong because at our user group we are really going to start with a bang this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Pragati, that's the first question I have to ask you. So how long into the new year can we say Happy New Year for? Because I'm still saying it on
Oh,
calls with people that I'm speaking to for the first time.
I, I,
So
I think I think I think I keep saying to people if I meet them for the first time, so it doesn't matter if I meet them in July or June. If I meet them in June also, I'll tell them Happy New Year.
perfect. I'm gonna keep this
But I
going, but
really
you're
don't know
absolutely
till what date you can actually say Happy New Year. I'm sure there should be a particular
Absolutely. Let's try and keep it going for as long as we can. But you're absolutely right. This is our first user group session of 2025, and we're going to get going with what we think is going to be an absolutely fantastic session. So today we're going to be looking at unlocking Fabric automation. So this is going to be lessons, possibilities, and also real world insights with Hector Sven. Hector has over 20 years worth of experience in the IT industry, and he's spent the last 8 years immersing himself with the world of Microsoft Azure, specializing in data management, analytics, and business intelligence. So with that being said, let's welcome Hector with us.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me today. And I'm joining the club of the people who are still saying Happy New Year. So Happy New Year for all the people that are on the call today. So happy 2025.
Excellent. I think it's a great club to be in, and hopefully for yourself and everybody else joining us today, wishing everybody a very fruitful 2025. So with that being said, Hector, let's pass over to you to jump into your session.
Thank you very, very much. So thank you, everybody. So today's session is about one tool that I developed called FabricCatalyst. It's a tool intended to do automation of Microsoft Fabric deployments, right? And deployments, I mean creation of Fabric ecosystems. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the tool. In addition, I'm going to give you a little bit also about the history, about how this come to be, the origin, because I think it's important for you to understand where this is coming from, what it was the initial need in which led me to start the process and the development of development of this tool, and then how has been the evolution, right? And because this will, I hope if you're working with Fabric, probably will relate to you and you will understand, oh my God, I mean, yeah, this is exactly what's happening to me, right? This is exactly what I've been stuck with Fabric so far, or this is the challenge that I have. And probably you will feel inspired to do something like this and to understand, even though Fabric it's an ongoing platform, I'm completely convinced that many companies in the future will adopt and move their data flows and processing to Fabric. So understanding how it works in detail and how to get the best out of it is something that I must have for all our Fabric practitioners, right? So with that in mind, I think Leon and was kind enough to give me a quick introduction of who I am. So I'm just gonna skip this slide for 1 second. Right, I work for Avanade. Okay, probably I missed to introduce that I work for a company here in Norway called Avanade. I'm original from Mexico, and I have, in addition, certain certifications. The last one being, of course, Fabric. Right. So the agenda for today is going to be, I will explore FabricCatalyst, the tool that I'm just talking about. I'm going to show you the intention, if time allows, is two demos. One is just to give you the auto deployment method of the tool. And then I'm going to, if time allows, and I hope that I have enough time for me to show you just a little bit also of the map deployment method for you to understand what is it and what is it, how is that deployment method cover some limitations on the deployment of Fabric, right? And with use cases it's useful for you to have that one, right? And some of the best practices. So we are going to get into it. So let's go right into how this whole thing got started, right? So I was working with a big Norwegian energy company. I was assigned, and we were working, and this company had a long time ambition to become the first world data-driven organization. So to that end, they are experiment with different platforms, right? And I was part of a big team, right, that we will try to help them get there, right? During that journey, one of the first things that we thought as a team is like, if we're going to do this, we need to adhere to the DevOps best practices, right? Anything needs to be automated. We need to adhere to DevOps practices and pillars. We need to do everything by infrastructure as code. We need to do automation as much as possible. We cannot have processes being done manually. We need to establish a strong CI/CD processes and development practices, like using versioning control and doing a proper release of our data products. I mean, probably that's very obvious in a software development consulting firms or people that are actually building development. But when you're working with companies, it's not necessarily that obvious, right? I mean, the practices needs to be developed, needs to be nurtured and established, right? And our goal was to establish it from day one. So we took a long time doing that one. And it came a time when Fabric came along and it offered the perfect platform to achieve this goal, right? Being completely data driven. And then they decided to go full on board with Fabric as their data platform to make that ambition happen, right? Become a data-driven company. Now, that ambition obviously requires preparation, right? Requires understanding, requires a lot of things. Among those things, I was one of the people who was, let's say, that I wanted to provide some learning experience to the people. So we said, okay, we want to develop in Fabric. We want to develop data products and features to those products. And we spent a lot of time establishing best practices for coding. So we don't want that to be any different in Fabric, right? We want to establish strong development processes in Fabrics, and we need then to train developers into development Fabric. Now, for this community, I totally understand that that if you're working with Fabric, at this point, you realize that development is a little bit different when you're working with a platform as a service type of services, versus software as a service. So there's some minor things that you need to understand how to handle between those two platforms, right? Now, in order for people to understand that, I designed a workshop that I wanted the people to go through, right? So I want, you have a workspace, and then you need to create that workspace connected to Git. Enable that workspace that will create, the objects that are defined within the Fabric folder. But then you need to do this and this and this, and this reference needs to be changed. So it was a lot of things that I want developers to understand. So in my mind, it's like, okay, I'm going to drive this workshop many times over to many different groups. And that base workspace that I wanted to create for many different groups, I didn't want it to create it manually, right? I mean, because it's not fun for you to have, because we want that exercise to be over and over and over for different type of people. And that workspace or that workshop require for people to just change things, right, within the workspace, experiment, probably delete stuff, you name it. And then every group needs to have that workspace from scratch, brand new, so they can start their activities assigned. So I said, okay, I'm not going to create this one manually, right? We were saying that we wanted to have everything DevOps, everything automation, IAC. Why not Fabric? And then I will start and investigate it. How can we do this? And then let me go to the next slide. So I was starting this sparked the idea of using automation in Fabric, right? And the investigation led me to understand and that the way to go should be understanding the Fabric API available and explode it as much as possible, right? I mean, let's say, okay, let's try to get this one all the way through it, right? So I started to develop some PowerShells and DevOps pipelines, which I was quite familiar. And that took that let's say that planted the seed to the first Fabric automation, and that was how FabricCatalyst was born. At the beginning, it was called Fabric Flow, but Fabric is a term that sometimes related to fabric as a fabric made of clothes. So somebody said like, Fabric Flow is probably take it. And I checked, and yes, it was. It was related to fabric as in clothes. So I thought, okay, I think it's a better name, FabricCatalyst. So that's why we rename it, and this is the work today. So at the end, this introduction lets me to tell you that FabricCatalyst is a project designed to automate the deployment of Fabric environments through PowerShell scripts that interact with the Fabric API. And in conjunction with DevOps pipelines, allow me to deploy or execute this PowerShell in environments that are ready to go. Because if you work with Azure DevOps and the pipelines, it creates agents that contains pretty much everything that you have. So it's a convenient way for me to execute those PowerShells because it reduces the problem of setting up locally the environment necessary to run PowerShell scripts. So it's not necessary, and actually the PowerShell scripts, as I'm going to show you, can be executed both locally and through pipelines, which I would recommend using pipelines because you can engage that one into CI/CD flow that you require. Okay, so we developed 3 different methods: the auto, which is the one that I'm about to show you, and then we have another 2, custom and map, which came from also conversations showing this tool and people saying, oh, well, you know what? How about doing this? I mean, how do we can manage and achieve this one in a different way other than the built-in functionalities of Fabric? So I'm going to talk a little bit more after. And if you have any questions, by the way, feel free to ask me anything while I'm doing the first and spinning up the first deployment pipeline for me to show you. So before that, just going to show you and show you a little bit of the context of what you're about to see, right? And hopefully it will make you better understand the process that I'm about to execute. So as I mentioned, this is the auto deployment method, which is basically what I did. I had a workspace template, as I mentioned. That was my golden version, or my initial workspace that I wanted to reproduce or clone over and over and over again, right? For my different workshops, for my different set of people that I wanted to train. This workspace template obviously was Git enabled. So as you can see, it was connected to a branch in Git. And then the process, as I wanted, is step 1. From this workspace template, first, I want to clone the branch that is attached to this template. Because the branch itself, when you have a Fabric workspace that it's Git enabled, the content of that workspace, right? Or let's say the items within that workspace, items that are supported by Git enable, will be reflected in code in the backend, right? So, and I will show you in the code how that looks like, but bear in mind that particularity that I explode in order to automate this one. Now, instead of, I'm taking this branch, and then the first step is, yes, I'm going to create a new workspace, But then I need to create a clone of this branch, right? To set the initial items within this workspace. And then I'm going to connect this workspace to this new branch, right? And FabricCatalyst is going to do all that for me. Step number 3, okay, step number 2, sorry, which is this one, is again, create the branch and then configure my workspace as Git enabled and put and configure it in such a way that it's connected to the branch that I just created, that I know contains the item definitions of the template that I wanted, right? Okay. Then the next step is to provide the security, right? Grant myself, or in this case, the group that I wanted to show, the admin of the clone workspace so they can manipulate it and create items and stuff like that. And then the next step, because the exercise was a fully functional environment, how to work with a fully functional Fabric environment. So that included also a Fabric Power BI deployment pipeline. I think it's Fabric. It's called now Fabric Deployment Pipeline, which is number 3. If you work with those ones, and if you know, you're here for a treat, because I will show you in just a second, right? I'm almost done with the explanation. Is I'm creating a deployment pipeline that contains stages. The default ones are dev, test, and production. And then each stage, it's been allocated with the workspaces that FabricCatalyst create. Okay? So that being said, this is what we're going to do. Now, this one last slide that I want you to understand, and this is just to support the best practices when you wanted to develop when you want to interact with API in Fabric, is that there's many operations that require for you to use that are called long-running operations, or LROs. Now, a long-running operation, it's basically, in a summary, it's like, okay, I want, in this case, initiate the connection, right? And you send the request, and the API will return either 2 things. It's like, yes, I'm done, or it will give you a no, I receive your request, and the result will be waiting for you on this other URL, right? So that protocol requires for you to use states, right? So as you can see here, I mean, the process goes like this. I'm first provisioning my workspace, then assigning the workspace the admins of the workspace. Then I'm creating a new Git branch. So all this is not an LRO enabled operation. Then I'm enabling Git integration to workspace, all of this configuration of the workspace. But then we need to perform 2 operations. One is the initialize connection. Once the workspace is connected to Git branch, you need to initialize the workspace, right? It's an operation. And then you need to update from Git operation. And I will show you in just a second what that means. But these 2 are LROs. And then once we move and create in this side our deployment pipeline, also we provision the deployment pipeline, assign the permissions, assign the workspace to the stages. But then the deployment, it's also an LRO operation. Now, in practice, again, many people, and I've seen this one, and actually I make that mistake myself. So that's why I don't want you to do it. So because sooner or later, you will have to rewrite everything that you do with invoke. When you're doing an invoke REST method, that's a very easy way to invoke REST API endpoints. But based on the fact that you need to read the status code return from the API, that's why you need to use invoke web request instead of invoke REST method. This is really important, right? when you're working with API and with Fabric API, many of these operations, right, and the result of the operations when you interact with, you need to understand or let's say consume the status code returned by the API, right? So with that being said, let's jump right into the demo, because this is what I guess everyone wants to see. Again, I'm open for questions. If you like to ask a question while the pipeline is running, by all means, please interrupt me and open the mic or send the question to Leon. All right. Now, I have my FabricCatalyst right here on my left-hand side. And as I mentioned, my workspace is this one, right? The medallion architecture template development. So this is an example, right? So, but let's imagine for the sake of argument, and actually it was quite close of what I use on my exercise that I just mentioned, right? And you know, as you can see, if you're familiar with Fabric, you will find very familiar stuff. I think 99% of Fabric workspace will contain at least a combination of these elements. You know, I have my lakehouse, I have several notebooks, I have a data pipeline, and I have a semantic model and a report, right? Pretty straightforward, nothing fancy. What else? Okay, now, if I go to my workspace settings, as I mentioned, I have my FabricCatalyst in a project called RTD, my Git repository. And this is, again, the important part that I just mentioned. When you Git enable a workspace, any item that it's enabled by Git enable, right? It will store the representation of that item in this folder that you configure here, right? And my main branch is main. So if we go really quickly, let me show you like this. Let's go really quickly to this branch. So I'm going to FabricCatalyst, RTD, and then my repository, right? So RTD, and then let's have my main branch, right? And we set Fabric Git enable, Fabric Git enable, and there it goes, right? So let me go back on this one, workspaces, medallion. So again, so you can see that all these items have a representation in its JSON format, right, in the branch. So by cloning this branch and attaching it to a new workspace, it will create a workspace along with those branches. And again, this is what I'm using when I'm using this deployment method, right? Okay. Having that said, I'm going to create this one, and I'm going to my pipelines within the RTD. I'm going to execute an auto deployment, run a pipeline. I'm using my one branch that I just created. Now, I also included in this one a couple of things that are important, is domains and subdomains. Even though currently it's new, I think it's still new, or is it in preview? I don't know. It was in preview, but it's so important. It's so useful for you to handle and to manage properly your workspaces in Fabric. So if I go to my admin portal, yeah, domains and subdomains, as you can see here, it's still marked as new feature. Recently, I think they just changed it recently to new. It was in preview mode, but this allows you or gives you a way to make the groups of your workspaces and to configure it more properly. And then you can also add security to domain and subdomain labels. So it gives you a level of granularity very useful for admins to make a good administration of your Fabric environment. Okay, now I'm going to create, my FabricCatalyst, that will be my domain. I don't think I'm going to change it. I'm going to Fabric subdomain, going to call auto deployment. Now, the Fabric workspace prefix, I'm going to call it, let's use Fabric UK user group, right? Just for you to see that I'm just doing this one. And then I want to create a deployment pipeline. Yes, I do. I want this one to be named as well like this. And the environments, which environments do I want to create? So first, I want to create my dev environment, and I'm saying that it should be Git enabled, right? So that is indicating the process that should create a branch and connect it to it, right? So, and I'm also going to use a UAT environment that obviously is not going to be Git enabled, because I don't want UAT to be Git enabled, because we want those items to be deployed by the deployment pipeline. And let's create one additional environment called production, right? All right, and I don't want either to be Git enabled. Now I'm gonna make myself the admin of this tree workspace that I'm about to create. So I think I have an extra comma here. Let's remove it. What else? So again, the Fabric pipeline that I'm going to create is this name. I also can assign any admins. My data products is default. It's just because of the configurations behind the scenes. I have the ability to create an empty branch. I don't want this one, but I'm saying that the source branch I'm going to clone is this one, main Fabric Git enable, which is the one that right now this workspace is using. So let's run it, right? So I think I have everything that I need. So let's run this one. Now, again, what this is going to happen is the pipeline first. If you're not familiar with pipelines, it will provision an agent for you that contains basically the framework, the PowerShell framework that you need. So it's quite convenient. Again, it's not mandatory, but makes it really, really easy for you to use it. And in particular, when you're working with PowerShell and with PowerShell in particular, and interacting with Git and Git branches and all this stuff that needs to be provisioned. So we completed our build that it's, again, encapsulating the PowerShell's modules that I'm using in order to create the functionality. And now we are getting first, we are retrieving a secret. Okay, there's another thing on this one. I'm still using an account that it's an account that is being created without MFA, because until just recently, right now I'm just testing how the APIs work with service principals, because until just recently they weren't supported. So right now I'm using a automation account without MFA in order to create this one, and to that account I granted admin over the Fabric capacity that I'm using, right? So having that said, let's go. It's already going to the interesting part of this one, right? So as I mentioned, yeah. So as you can see here, it already created a Workspace Fabric UK user group. So let's monitor this one. On my right side, I'm going to try to show you while it's doing its thing. So workspaces. Now let's go to my auto deployment, and now I can see Fabric user group. Now you can see that right now create this workspace. Now, yeah, you can see this one. I'm adding the people. Now connected, initialize the workspace to the branch in Git. This is what the step is doing right now. Its works has been initialized. So as you can see, now it's sync. And the second part is, as you can see, yeah, it already provisioned the items in the branch in this workspace. Now it's also creating the second part of this process is already created. Oh, this is going much faster than I would expect it will be. So I need to hurry up and just show you that in my auto deployment, it already created my dev, my prod, and my UAT, right? And right now, it already created the deployment pipelines. So let's see, Fabric user group, it's already created. And also, as you can see here, right now what it's doing, as I mentioned, it already assigned to this development stage the Fabric user group called -dev. In my test, the test, in the production, And glad that you can see this one, that the process in its final stage is just executing the deployment to each of those stages. So what it took a few minutes at most, and what do we have at the end? A fully functional Fabric environment, right? Isn't that cool? That it could otherwise will be taking much longer, and probably if you don't do this one using automation tactics and techniques, probably prone to errors, prone to, hey, you know what? Oh yeah, geez, I created this workspace, but I forgot to add this particular group, the permission, the workspace permission. So you can see by handling Fabric environments via code, right, with a IIC type of philosophy behind it, you can reduce errors. You can make this process way much faster, and you can create, as many environments as you like. And this is what I did. Now, the process is complete. So let me just, before I show you the second part, please, I don't see any questions from the audience. Are we cool? Can we move along?
Yes, absolutely. No questions, as you've mentioned at the moment, Hector. I think everybody is grossly following along.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm glad. All right. So, and everything at this point of time looks great, at least from the first objective that we have, which is creating a fully functional Fabric environment. I think it's done, right? It's using the functionality that it's building in Fabric. I created exactly what I wanted, my template and my 3 workspaces. Also, another benefit of using this way is we can enforce also naming conventions, both in the in the workspaces, and also the elements within the workspace. We can enforce security. We can enforce naming conventions. We can enforce best practices. Now, going back to the example of and the original objective, right? And this is going to be, you'll understand what's the limitation. If you haven't worked with Git-enabled workspaces, this is going to sound like a shock. Let me show you. So I have my medallion architecture template development, and we said that we clone from this one to others, right? Okay, so good enough. Now, if I were a developer, and this was part of the exercise that I want the people to understand, right? And okay, I want to execute this this notebook, correct? If I click on this one, and I'm going to my lakehouses, and I click run all. I'm not going to do it because that's not the objective. I mean, that's not the point of this one. What I wanted to show you is this. If you go to your workspace, to this notebook, there's something funny. If you click run all and connect, everything that this notebook does will be towards the lake house in the medallion architecture template development. It was like, how? I mean, why? We are saying that I have my lake house here, correct? I have my workspace, I have my lake house, I have my notebook. Why is it my notebook, when I click run, is just performing the operations towards another workspace / lake house? And the reason is this: the references of your of your notebook is pointing to the origin. And the reason is because, remember, and this is what I wanted to for people to understand, is the differences between a pass and a SaaS, and especially with Git-enabled workspaces. So if I go to the code, and let me go really quickly, and I think this will answer the question, or why is this one? If I go to my notebook-content-py, this is the reason. I'm cloning from a branch. So the branch is actually containing the reference to, I mean, this, you don't see it, and this is the reference to the old to the medallion architecture, to the template, workspace, and lakehouse, right? So part of the exercise was to people to understand that when you created and when you're working with Git-enabled workspaces, saying you wanted to develop a new feature in an existing workspace, I want you to create a new branch, right? A new space for you to being able to develop in a safe manner before you branch, send your changes back to the origin, right? But you need to understand when you're executing your notebooks or your semantic models and your reports, where are those items pointing to, right? Also, let me show you one additional. Let's say that I wanted to go to my semantic model. Again, check this out. My semantic model, it's pointing to my medallion architecture template dev. This is not where we want it. Now, there's a way to resolve this one via, and this is exactly what we can achieve with the deployment pipelines, right? Because in the deployment pipelines, now this is what you customize in your deployment pipelines. You go here and you can create what do we call rules, which is this one, right? And you can say, oh yeah, okay, so when I'm working with dev, let's use the dev lakehouse. But when I'm working with UAT, I want this notebook to be pointing to my UAT lakehouse. And when you're going to production, the same thing. But there's some limitations on this one. One of which is that not all the items, as of now, are you can define, you can change those connections via deployment pipelines, unfortunately. As you can see here also, if you're not the owner of the notebook, in this case, the owner is in this case, who's representing the deployment pipeline, you won't be able to change it. So there's a few limitations that we want to overcome. So this is great to some extent, but there's stuff that we need to tailor afterwards, right? And it's a little bit tricky. Right now, you cannot change the ownership of a notebook. So in order for me to actually change this, I will have to go back to the code and change the reference manually, checking, and then make it work in a different way. And that's not exactly what we want. Now, that is why we created another couple of deployment methods, the custom and the map, right? And this quick example that I'm going to show you before I run out of time, because I think I still have time for me to show you, is the map version of it, right? So what can we achieve with the map is to deploy the workspaces, right? In this case, make a deployment through our dev test production environment, but without the need of a Fabric deployment pipeline. And again, not because it doesn't work, it's just because it has some limitations that at this point of time we need to overcome. Again, because the needs of the companies requires, right? So with that being said, let me show you what the map does, right? So the map, as the definition, is designed for large scale and complex deployment that involve multiple environments and dependencies. So the map is actually a JSON map, right? Let's be clear. It's a JSON map that contains all the relationship that you want between your workspace, your lake houses, your environments, and everything. You define it, your map, and you give it to FabricCatalyst, and FabricCatalyst will take that map, traverse the tree as you define it, and then create the workspaces and items within it. So let me show you. Okay, now I'm going to run this one, and I decided to run it now for the sake of changing a little bit using now Visual Studio, or in this case, it could be, I use Visual Studio because I have the license and all. So, but I think you can also use Visual Studio Code. I'm not expert on Visual Studio Code, so I decided to use Visual Studio regular, right? So again, let me just did this one right here. And the map, as you can imagine, it looks like this. So this is the map that I'm going to run for this demo, right? So again, no surprises that it's a JSON map as I described it would be. So, okay, a little bit bigger, and then you can see this one. Okay, now in the map, what do we have with the map? So the map allows us to change the references of the items before we create them, right? So the deployment between dev, test, and production is not going to be through the deployment pipeline. I mean, it's not going to be through this, but FabricCatalyst will do it for you. And before it deploys to different environments, it will manage and change the references, correct? So let's say, in this example, I'm creating, again, a FabricCatalyst, and I'm going to create a subdomain called Fabric UK user group. I'm going to create a workspace with this name, right? But before that, I'm saying, yes, when you go to your lakehouse, you create your lakehouse. And actually, in this exercise, I'm actually creating a shortcut to my lakehouse that points to this Azure Data Lake ADLS Gen 2, right? I'm also creating a notebook, but again, what allow me this to do is this. Because now I can say, yes, in this notebook, don't connect it to the default, or don't connect it to the origin, right? Let's say the source that contains the definition of the notebook, which would be in this case this one. It will replace or change the JSON before deploying it, and by doing so, overcoming the limitations of the deployment pipeline, right? And you can think of this one that it can do way more stuff, right? I mean, we can include so far, I have, for instance, this other map that I've been testing and using for development. In this case, on this one, I'm creating lake houses. I can create warehouses. I can create semantic models, notebooks, reports, and I mean, you name it. This also includes the ability for you to assign the airbag assignments at workspace level. And also you can define who's going to be your admins of both your domains and subdomains. So you can create very complex type of maps and let FabricCatalyst to deploy that one and create it for you, right? So let's go with this example. Again, I'm going to execute my map, right, using this little function right here, and let's create it. Okay, so let me just do this one, and then whoop, boom. Okay, running. Now let's see what's going to happen, right? So it's going to ask me to begin with. Right, there he goes. It's asking me for my credentials. So I'm going to use mine in this case. So there it goes. And yes, now in this case, I'm using my credentials instead of the automation account, right? And then pretty much someone that you would expect in the same way, right? I'm using the PowerShell, printing some control information on this one. Here in my definition of the default variables that I'm saying which is the data product that I'm using. And by doing this, I'm just saying that you should pick this config.json because that's a map that I wanted to create for this data product, right? So let's go. Now it says, okay, the new domain is Fabric UK user group. Let's see. Let's track this down and hopefully everything will work as expected. Let's give it a try, right? So let's go to workspaces. Let's refresh. And then let's filter by, nope, it's still not there. Workspaces. Now, yeah, okay, Fabric UK user group. Now we have our workspace dev. and already create my lake house right here. And now, let's see, yeah, here, the shortcut, it's also being created. So let's click on this one, and then boom, we have our shortcut, right, to based on the connection that we previously defined, pointing to one Azure Data Lake storage, right? It also created, based on the map that I defined here, notebooks, one with content. As you can see here, it's defining which is the source of the notebook that we want to create by doing this one. I'm saying in this directory, there's the definition of the notebook that I want you to create, right? So it's taking this one, and then the way it works, the API, you need to convert the whole file as a 64-bit string, which you send to the API, and the API will take that 64-bit string and then process it and then create the corresponding Python file on it, right? You can also, in this case, I'm creating another one called empty notebook. As you can see here, I'm just saying, just create a notebook, just don't put anything because I'm not sending any definition on my second notebook. So if everything works as expected, let's go here. It's still, yeah, it's done. So I guess we just need to refresh, and there it goes, right? So we have our notebook here and the empty notebook that I just show you, right? Now, this is the two demos, and then I'm going to jump to the next slide here before I explain something. Now, let's go to the not so pretty things, right? And I just wanted to share with you my observations based on my investigation and my the development of this tool, and what are the current challenges that I face with with the Fabric automation. I think one of the first ones is growing pains, right? I mean, Fabric is growing very rapidly. Microsoft is investing a lot of money on it, but during that development, there's stuff that sometimes don't work the way they want it, or there's stuff missing. So we have to deal with it, right? I have to deal with it, and sometimes even bang my head against the wall, just scratching my head like, why this is not working, right? Just to realize that it was something lacking in documentation, and that just make the whole thing fail, right? Which I didn't know, and the process or the API didn't give you the right message back for you to figure it out. Another thing is the compromise between what's coming versus what's available. What I meant with this one is that sometimes the marketing of Microsoft promised a lot of things, and we have also the MVP saying, "Oh, yeah, no, the next month there's going to be an amazing feature that's going to come, and we're all going to be happy." And it's like, okay, but while this thing comes, should I just wait? I mean, is it an option on today's world, just doing nothing and waiting for your competition to do it and to win the client just because you're waiting for something to happen? I mean, I would like to, and if anyone will have a comment on that one, please share it with me. But my experience is that no, sometimes we need to make a compromise, right? I mean, and we need to decide which battles do we fight on this, right? Are we going to wait, and it's a risk versus benefit type of game? Yeah, so we're going to wait, and what is the risk of it, right? Should we risk it? If not, okay, let's move it and pick the ones that we wanted to, that we decided we cannot risk of waiting, even though it will require some effort, some development effort, just to do something while the actual stuff comes along, right? Another thing is this term called arrival fallacy. I mean, the psychology of anticipation, which is basically high expectations of Fabric, right? It's an amazing product. It's an amazing platform, but probably is not there yet according to probably other platforms with more mature, that are more mature, that have way more time than Fabric. But the point being is that we have with this big events, right, that promise too many things. Even though something like this is awesome from my point of view, but sometimes living to the expectations sometimes is not good enough. Not because the product is bad, but probably the expectations are just sometimes too high. Again, please tell me if you disagree with that remark. I will more than glad to hear. The last one that I hear all the time is, because I think at some point Microsoft also announced that Terraform will be the platform pick to develop something similar to the one that I've been working on. But that also had some. I decided not to, because it again is just too early in the game for me to trust that Terraform will keep up the pace on what I wanted, right? I didn't want to have that dependency because of licensing and because of many other factors. So I didn't want that one. So I decided that it would be best for me to just to develop this one from scratch. And the API is available for everyone, right? So when you're in this journey, you probably will have to decide as well which path you would like to go. And this will be one of the things that you need to decide. With that in mind, and now I think we're on the mark of the 52 minutes, me talking. Is there anyone having any questions?
Excellent. Fantastic demonstration. Thank you very much, Hector. We do have a question and some comments as well. So Pragati, would you like to kick us off, please?
Yeah. So we have a question from Rishi. I'll take the question first. So Rishi is asking, or let me display it. Is it possible to automate the creation of workspace managed identity service principle to assign ownership and access?
It's definitely possible. Actually, it's possible, but I mean, it's possible. But let's put it. But I think it shouldn't be part of Fabric because of the concern, right? If I would do this, I probably would like a separate process, right? An automated process interacting with the Graph API from Microsoft, because that's the one with the permissions. I mean, you need certain permissions at Entra ID directory for you to create service principal, right? So, and yeah, but I think I misunderstood it. It says creation of workspace manage identity, creation of workspace manage identity service principal to assign ownership and access. Okay, so I think it's more. No, I think I misunderstand the question. I think it's more like, can you create the workspaces using a service principal instead of an automation account? I think I misread the question, and the answer is yes. I'm working on it. Actually, I believe on, well, if I'm not recall correctly, November or something last year, they announced partial ability for you to use identity service principles, but I haven't had the time to fully test it yet. But it's coming, and I'm convinced 100% to my core that it's something that it will be coming eventually.
Thank you, Hector. Would you like to take the comments, Leon?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, comment coming in from Rishi here. He's saying that having worked with yourself at Avanade, he can confirm that this is a real need in the market currently for clients that are looking to implement Microsoft Fabric. And then outside of that, Thomas, hi Thomas, has mentioned absolutely great stuff as well throughout today's session. So Hector, I think that I can say that today's session has been very, very insightful, especially for those. So we have a very wide ranging skill set within our audience. And I think that those that are just getting started with automation in Fabric as well, this has probably been very eye-opening in terms of the art of the possible, shall we say, from an automation perspective there. So I think it's been very, very, very good session.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that I've heard that a lot about Fabric being a SaaS service. I mean, there's so little space for automation that you can do, and actually that's not true. I mean, I could show you, and I just show you that all the things that you can automate it's just amazing, right? It's just a matter of finding the right API. Again, I'm pretty sure that not everything is going to be able to do it today, but we're going to the correct direction, right? And as you can see, it's a token of what you can do today. And more awesome stuff we'll be able to do tomorrow. So
I fully agree. And when you do have some of those additional features and capabilities locked in, I think it would be fantastic to have you back with us to come and give us another demonstration of those features if possible.
Of course, yeah. I'm looking forward, and as many times as you would like to have me, I'll be more than happy to talk to your audience. It's been a great experience, and ping me, ask me questions if you later on. There's my contact information here. Well, I'm gonna leave on my blog some example, about the code, a piece of the code that obviously probably will be not good time for me to explain all of this one. But something like this, I'm just going to leave it in an example of how to manage LRO operations, how I do it, right? Again, for people who would like to do something like that and just starting with the journey, I will deliver this one and leave it on my blog. And please, just my contact information is there. Just contact me, look for me, and I'll be more than happy to help you if you get stuck.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you very much, Hector. And we have shared all of your contact details in the chats on various platforms as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you in the future. With that being said, Pragati, it's been a very amazing start to 2025. And I know that our community will be waiting with bated breath, shall we say, for a lot more of the great information and insights we're going to be bringing this year as well.
Of course, I think we have got some great sessions coming up and some amazing speakers on the user group. So watch out for our new updates and new announcements. So we look forward to bringing more stuff to you guys.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us at the Microsoft Fabric UK user group. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us.
Thank you, everyone.